So, you know,
spent it too fast.
I know. I'm sorry. I thought it was going to start in the middle, and I just, classic, spent my whole load right in the moment,
You're
5
welcome.
seconds, yeah, I mean, how's that for a cold open? But what we were talking about, D&D and how I like to take one monster that the party just barely, eked it out, and I want that to be like more the shock troops later, so that they have to fight, like 5 at a time, and what do they do with that? And I made it topical and relevant because Gwen almost died shooting the spider matriarch in the face, and like, what are they going to do if there's 5 of them? And then, just the show hadn't started by then, so that was it. That's the cold open. That's the whole thing.
That was
So
the segue, the cold open, and the explanation of.
right. Man, we're so good at podcasting. Like
We're
a
professionals.
decade, of
Oh,
experience, and
God.
just yeah.
When you
You're
say
all
it like
jealous of our skills. Yeah.
that.
Look, man, I could be ridiculous all day. That is just a free service that I offer. So
We are all a little off kilter today, so it's gonna be great. But speaking of Gwen, it is a great segue because we open chapter 49 at 69%. Congratulations. And Gwen's finally woken up from having been beaten to shit by the spider matriarch. And all she knows is that she's in pain. Which is a good starting point. That her head hurts so bad, and she thinks that did she get like really hungover? Like, did she drink too much?
right.
And then
How
she's
much
like,
did I drink?
yeah. Then she remembers the guardsmen at House Lancaster when they had migraines after drinking too much, and she always just looked down on them. It's like, handle your liquor better. Her phrase, "Gather up your scrotum," has
Right.
keep going in my head this week, and so it's just like that's the moment that, yes, but she doesn't remember what happened.
If you want classic, I believe "gird your loins" fits a little better, and then people are like, what does that mean? And whatever, but "gather up your scrotum," very snappy.
It's more like hitch up your skirts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
You wear long robes. You can't go to battle wearing long robes. So you just tie them around your groin.
Right. Yeah.
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 Like you just,
Here's
it's
something
clothe
really
your
visceral.
loins. Gird your loins just means clothe your loins. That's it. I don't know. Hooray.
History teacher, everybody. So
Whee!
I thought you were like in a foreign country again or something. So here we are.
Well, I mean, it certainly sounds like I am with the amount of construction going on outside. So,
are you saying
and also,
you can't tell the difference between EG and Andreas?
No, that's not what I was saying. Yeah.
Oh,
I was just like, didn't New Jersey like break off and fall into the sea yet? I mean, geez. So
that's actually California.
Well, I mean, there are several states I think it would apply to at this point, but yeah. Anyway.
The last thing that Gwen remembers is Master Ferris singing sadistically unfortunate lyrics to a truly disgusting Aeronaut song, and then maybe the giant matriarch spider. She doesn't really get it, and she wants to write apology notes to Esterbrook and his men for making fun of their hangovers. And she's like, she touches her head, and then she notices that both her head and her hand are bandaged. She's like, what the hell happened? She just doesn't get it.
How drunk was I?
Yeah. But because of the bandages, it makes her think that, okay, she didn't drink too much. She's clearly been injured, and that's why she can't remember anything. And that makes her feel a lot more dignified, even though she's stomping around with like a mummy's worth of bandages. And she realizes that she's on the Predator somewhere in an airship, and there is another occupant in a room, just one of the sailors of the Predator, and he is zonked out, completely sleeping. And even though he's clearly supposed to be watching her to make sure she doesn't move too much, but she gets up and sees her clothing on the floor that has horrible spider blood on it, and she doesn't want to put that back on, so she just rummage around and find somebody else's clothing to be able to just put on and borrow, even though that's never going to get back to its original owner anyway.
And that day, a new Aeronaut was born.
Yes.
That's how it happens. You have a really fancy lady show up with like ruined clothes, and then she puts on the leathers, and she just never goes back. So
there is a description, because she is tiny. She has to roll up the arms and legs so much that it's comical. She looked down at herself when finished. Felt certain that Mother would be entirely scandalized by her appearance. It would do. If you can piss off your mother, it's good enough. She's trying to find anyone else on the Predator that isn't unconscious. She doesn't know that like Grimm and Kettle and Benedict have left.
Relevant, topical.
Yeah. What would Gwen think of a yellow ducky?
Oh, she wouldn't stop yelling at Dresden the entire time. Like if you just swapped out, Gwen for Susan, she would just like, look, lady, I'm trying to fight a demon here. Okay. So
she would turn into her mother, but the undignified comments.
Probably. Yeah.
Gwen would get her way into Bianca's party.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, she would have done exactly the same thing to Susan.
Fucking gauntlet. She can handle herself.
Susan had the garlic and the holy water and the gun. I mean, like she did come prepared as much as she could be.
Yeah, there's a thing about the hordes of the undead that people just don't respect numbers, man. So
something D&D, foot soldiers.
Relevant, topical. I'm on it today.
Even while hungover. Right. There are people that she finds in the engine room. Most of them are still unconscious and sleeping from something, but she comes up against Journeyman because the madman, is still awake and fiddling with his crystals and its harnesses. And she asks, I'm looking for Benedict Sorellin. I was wondering if you'd seen him. And he goes, is he in here? Which says, no, definitely not. Then I don't know who he is. Go away. Actually, she says, definitely not. And he says, same answer. And then he looks to the wrench that slips out of his hand is, curse you for a whore, bloody strumpet, you'll be the death of me. Gwen, 16-year-old houseland cancer, scandalized. Excuse me, sir, what did you say to me? And he has to explain.
Not you, the wrench. Yeah. Or the ship.
Yes, the Hazlitt cage.
Right.
Fantastic. Like, I don't have enough to do already. Now I have to deal with Aristo brats too. Captain hates me. That's what it is. You can't go fight Journeyman. You have to stay on the ship and fix her up enough for me to ruin Journeyman. God in heaven, the man hates me. Gwen, trying to be polite, says, sir, I'll be glad to leave you to your work. If you could please direct me to the captain, I'll get out of your hair. Journeyman is bald. And he turns around and says, my what? Like, your lair with no.
Yeah.
Captain's gone.
Quick
Doc's
on
gone.
her feet. So
yes, every deckhand still on his feet is gone. It's just my crew and these hired slackers left, and Tarky, but Tarky's barely able to hobble along. I guess that means your Benedict is gone too. But God, where? And he says, motherless horse-spawn mist shark tunnel rat. And she just, oh, for God's sakes, she walks over and slips her arm because she's smaller. She can fit into the narrower places, grabs the wrench and draws it back without cussing, without getting injured. And then he warns her away, like, you shouldn't be messing with the ship systems if you don't know what you're doing because you'll electrocute yourself. And then she's like, that's why I didn't touch any of the arcs, the active arcs. You're only running power from the topmost bars. And so she knows what she's doing. No one is going to believe her except for someone who knows that Lancaster. And he phrases it this way. It's like, you think you know something about ships, do you? And she says, I know a little bit about ships. Mostly know about crystals and how they need to be hooked up. I know the topmost left side bar is out of alignment by at least 2 degrees. You're losing efficiency from it. That's probably why the air is so warm.
Right. This whole thing is just fantastic to me, right? Because it's like all we've gotten from her so far is, rich brat, and she solves problems like an arrow, straight and forcefully and just everything like that. But you actually get to see some of her skills and, just the continued, back and forth here of like, yeah, it's out of alignment. Oh, cool. You just put it further out of alignment. And he's like, well, shit, guess you do know your shit. So
yeah. And he asks, basically, why do you think that? How is it 2 degrees off? And she says, it's the tone. You can hear the burr of it on the side. And he goes and fixes it. And he says, there, all better. And they said, no, you did it too far the other way. And then he says, okay, how's that? And that's done it. And like that seems like a test of whether she actually knows her shit or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then he gives her the wrench and she says, what am I to do with this? Like, bolt, the one I was trying to work on. Go do it. Loosen it if you can. Right. But she's able to. They're able to start working together. And Gwen takes a good look at the crystal itself. It didn't have a proper jewel-faceted shape. It was instead formed into a much more natural-looking crystal, like a shaft of glowing emerald quartz. And she recognizes it. Like, that's a first-generation power core before they started developing facets. So how old is it? And he says it's a few thousand years at least. And all of her experience means like that is a tremendously efficient core. It should be in a fleet ship. And Journey is very possessive. He says, well, she ain't. She ain't going to be. She's Pretty's, and that's that.
It belongs in a museum.
It belongs in a battle cruiser, I think is what it is. So, yeah.
It will be in a battle cruiser, just one that's built around the Predator at some point in the future.
Right.
Journeyman asks, how does she learn anything about ship systems? And it's like, from my mother. And who's your mother? Helen Lancaster. And Lancaster, the Lancaster, the battery.
Do you know a different kind? So
Exactly. I've been learning about our product since I was old enough to speak, including running systems benchmarks on every crystal before we send it out. That means knowing how the systems work. Those Lancasters. Damn. All right. They have the lift crystal that they still need to replace for the old one. The trim crystals are all in, but they still have to rig the main one. Could use someone with a good ear for that. And she asks, which crystal? And he says, it's one of the new Mark 4Ds. No. Which crystal, not just which one of the category.
When you spend generations growing them, I guess you can afford to, know them individually like that. Otherwise, I find this part really freaking weird, but
Also depends on the numbers. Like, if there's a dozen, she can know them all individually. If there's 400, that's a bit different. So,
sure.
It's kind of like an implication of how many they are, or it's an implication of just how much she had to study.
Listen, if Folly can know the names of all her crystals,
yeah, but
which
she
I'm
gave
sure
them
she
those
does.
names. Like,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely would have taken it up a notch if he's like, well, this is XYZ129, and she's like, oh, Jeffrey, then that would be, maybe she's going to be an etherealist in like 3 books or something. But
so Journeyman just lets her look at the crystal and says, you tell me. And she says, it's the one from the vat in section 3, row 2. It's one of the best in the batch. God in heaven, if you aren't cautious with that power core behind this crystal, could tear the ship apart. Tell me something I don't know. And so she asks, what configuration is he going to do? And he said, standard dispersible maximum spacing. And he says, what? Why? Why would you do that? That's not what the manual says. Look, how else should I do it? It's like, didn't you read the owner's manual? See here, Missy, I've been an etheric engineer since before you were born. I think I know how to handle a lift crystal. Evidently, you aren't bright enough to do so if you cannot read. We provide those manuals and specifications and procedures for a reason. If you do everything by the book, like everybody else, you get the same results as everybody else. That's the idea.
Classic
because
engineer,
we don't want you to blow yourself up or rip open the core on the ship and fall out of the sky. He says that might be good enough for every other ship, but that's not good enough for Pretty. I get 10 to 15% more out of her systems doing it my way. And Gwen asserts that's not possible. Maybe not in your workshops, but a ship in the open sky is different. You got to know how to treat her the way she likes. Well, take it from me, she's not going to like that dispersal pattern. The bottom hemisphere of the Mark 4Ds is rigged with variable sensitivity. The closer to the positive end you get, the more powerful the crystal's pathways are. You need to set your bars in an asymmetric configuration to maximize sensitivity. If you go with a standard hemisphere, it will be too easy to dump too much current in. Before you know what happened, you'll be watching the crystal fly to the moon while your ship falls, which you would know if you had read the manual.
I just love this as fulfilling so many purposes in the book.
Right.
You have character building. relationship building between the characters. You have exposition for us because they're having a fight, and it's just so cool geeky talk, and it kind of makes sense even though it is nonsense, even though it has no basis
Right.
real in reality. It's got some basis in reality. It's got some
Sure.
basis in
It
it's
feels
Well,
like it does, at least.
and he does it.
yes,
He does it without having, to play the talking head versus the idiot trope. Like
right,
Journeyman's sort of playing the idiot, but we also know that he's a genius, so he's pretending to be dumb. For some of this too. Like some of his points, he's being obstinate right now about the configuration of the cage. But some of the other stuff, he's just pretending to be, to see what she knows. And it all works without being, a trope that you've seen 100 times,
right.
or 1,000 times. But
And this also is important to, like, it's the whole reason that Grimm took the job, right? Is to get these crystals. And it's going to be the thing that saves them when, the big final battle happens.
what? Spoilers?
All right. Chapter 50. We're no longer on set. We're at 71%. Or with Aspira, and somebody is shaking him awake, and it's Seriaco, and he just says, "Sir, that woman's here." Which is not what he wants to hear ever.
Right.
Yeah. And he says, "Better ready the men," and Seriaco is going to go do that. And Aspira has a moment that even though he knows that Seriaco is injured, he's able to heal faster and just kind of put up with pain more. So Aspira feels like it would have been nice if I was also partially warrior born or something like that. And then he regrets that. It's like, because of the political system that he has, the landscape would have meant that he would never have been able to rise in the ranks as much as he has. All right. Cavendish and her pet monster, Sark, are there waiting. Right. And let's see, Sark looked like he always did, but Aspira had worked with the warrior-born long enough to realize a slight dilation to the pupils of Sark's crooked eyes meant he was tense and ready for battle. He had been hoping for blithe, arrogant confidence from Cavendish. Whatever business she had done with the Albions, it had not gone precisely to her schedule. So now she's angry and even more dangerous. And she says, I believe the time has come for us to act. And he's surprised because that means that they're moving early. They had a different type of schedule, and she's saying move now. And she's going to signal the Armada, in which only she can. And once that happens, they're committed. We asked, why does she believe precipitous action is required? She says that she misjudged a man, the same commander who defeated your men at the Lancaster Battery. And Aspira gets angry at that one. It's like, he's here and you didn't tell us this? He's one of their fleet washouts with a crew of privateers. They aren't professional soldiers, and their numbers have been significantly reduced, but they can make a great deal of noise before your men wipe them out, and they might sap some of your strength. Judging by Grimm's confidence, they are coming here in their tunnels, wherever Cavendish and Aspira are. Strike the primary and secondary targets and make for an extraction point. I want your men gone by the time they arrive. And Aspira's like, so we're going to leave like large mobile army chasing after us and run away? And Cavendish says she will attend to them. They won't be able to pursue. And then she asks about the prisoners, which we know are Bridget and Folly. Aspira asks what she has intended for them, and she says, the same as I intend for the rest of the Spirarch's merry band, which means spiders. Aspira is trying to do as he's told and talking to Seriaco about the orders, and Seriaco also asks, like, after they're just leaving everything, take only weapons and go. But what about those two girls? Because they don't actually want to hurt them. They're as good as dead and no longer our concern, Sergeant. Seriaco says, the world might be a brighter place without Sark and that woman in it. And Aspira has replied, like, creating a brighter world is not our concern or duty, Sergeant. From this point, we just have to get out here. All right. chapter 51 goes back to Grimm doing exactly as Cavendish said, of hunting them down in the tunnels. And Felix, the verminositor, is there saying, it's just not natural. That's all I'm saying. And Grimm looks at the verminositor and says, you can only give me a general idea of which section of the tunnels your missing man was in. It would seem that our companion, Merle the cat, has a more specific idea. And Felix is distrustful of the cat and says that the beast is leading us into a trap. Grimm says, I certainly hope so. I'd like to think that we haven't brought all these weapons for nothing.
Right.
Felix trying to get more information. He says, oh, you say that the cat belongs to a guardsman. Not this one, a different one. That clearly these two are working together. I dare say our guide is acquainted with Raoul. Right. Grimm is trying to get more information from Merle, but he doesn't know her name, so he just says Miss Cat. And he confirms that Merle was sent by Raoul to fetch them. Do you know exactly where the girls are being held? And she says yes. And then she shakes her head left and right, saying no. And Felix like, there. What are you supposed to do with that? That's conflicting information, and I don't like it. Grimm says, apparently I need to learn to speak cat, but Benedict is there, and he does a little bit. So can you understand them at all? It's barely more than a greeting and a few pleasantries. It's a complex language. It takes years to learn, and at this point, Merle looks pleased. Felix has a map, and he tries to give it to Merle of like, show us where on the map is it going to be. And Merle can't really understand this. Like, it's just symbols on a flat piece of paper, and it's not how she experiences the world in the like 3D and sight and smell.
Well, and it's even established the warrior-born have a tough time with maps, you know?
Yeah,
because of their nature. So
this is where it's established of Benedict has to explain that Merle can't understand it. It's too abstract. Maps are symbols, and she doesn't have the necessary experience she needs to understand one. And this is what he experienced when he had to learn how to read maps, of putting the abstract on a paper to match how he experiences the world in much more visceral sensory information. And Grimm thinks maybe we don't need her to read a map. Perhaps we need her to draw one. And Grimm says he needs a piece of chalk. Who has a piece of chalk? Harry Dresden would always have a piece of chalk, but in this case, it's Stern. Stern has chalk for some reason.
Right.
Stern is Harry Dresden confirmed.
Stern is very handy, right? He's a jack of all trades kind of for them. So
he feels like a successor to Aaron from Codex Alera, who was the better version of Butters.
Okay, so Butters, well, I mean, I guess he's got a lightsaber now, but I was like, we'll give him 2 knives and then he'll be better.
A couple of knives. And Stern's got guns and bigger guns.
Right.
Okay. So Grimm explains that he wants Merle to pace out the length of the tunnels in questions relative to one another, of like, not at full length, but maybe one pace to every 30 that she would have to do. And he crawls around behind her awkwardly, scratching on tunnel floors with chalk to make it match. And after several minutes of being awkward, they are able to match that section to a section of the map that they can read. All right. So she must have walked all around the perimeter because there's like a gap in the middle of it all. There's 4 ways in and 4 ways out. And Merle disagrees. And so there's less. They've blockaded tunnels, and she nods. They cut down the approach to 2 tunnels and left themselves 2 ways out. And Felix suggests they split up and attack both in different directions. Like, down tunnels that they prepared to defend, we'd pay a heavy price and never get to the prisoners before they're killed. Okay, so then what? Their only chance is for us to get in fast and hard, find the prisoners, and get out again before the enemy can react properly. We need to go in from a direction they do not expect. A coin toss may be the best we can hope for. Mr. Stern, hi, Skip. I trust that you brought the blasting charges we acquired from the Aurorans in Habel Morning. Because Stern is always prepared.
Boy Scout. Chalk.
Well, that just makes him Jane.
Firearms.
You know, did you bring the grenades? You told me not to bring the grenades.
Right. Sure would be nice if we had some grenades right about now, wouldn't it?
Chapter 52, we get to see the rescue from Bridget and Folly's side. There's odd clicking noises, and that alerts Bridget to something is happening. She and Folly had decided to resume their original positions in the event that their captors peeked in at them, and the leather cords are just loosely wrapped around their wrists and not actually binding them anymore. The rapid, irregular clicks, somehow familiar, came from the enemy camp. And they're able to see there's dozens and dozens of adult silk weavers with leathery, armored bodies and torsos the size of Bridget's own.
So, like I said, one was really tough. So let's throw, a dozen at you or more.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they're not the size of the matriarch, but they are adults, and there are a lot of them. And then Bridget notices that all of the rest of the camp is empty. There's no one else there, and everything has been gone. The camp has been abandoned, and so have Bridget and Folly. And then there's bunches of silk weavers. Okay. And Folly looks down at her little crystals and says, "Don't worry, I'll protect you." Or she's only got the one at the moment, but Bridget, going out in the camp and noticing empty, was able to grab the jar of all the rest of them. Right. And Bridget says, "Can you do anything to get us out of here?" Folly says that she can't do that big giant explosion that she had done when fighting the silk weavers before, because there are no currents in this area. There's no ley lines, but there's another blocked hall to the left, and there's a conduit there, so she could use that. It's about 50 feet in that direction. And Bridget goes back to her complaints about, in a drama, a heroine would have immediately devised a plan to sacrifice herself boldly for her companion. She'd rush out into the hall and fling crystals back to Folly, then run in the opposite direction, screaming and drawing all the silk weavers after her, put up a bold fight, ultimately die gallantly while Folly brought terrible retribution upon the surface creatures, and then finished the mission, mourning her fallen friend in the aftermath. Heroines in dramas, Bridget felt, really ought to have more sense. And in her anxiety, she hears that there are voices speaking next to the silk weaver sounds. Why are humans near the silk weavers? And then she puts together the fact that the silk weavers are being controlled by someone, and she absolutely needs to get that information to somebody who knows what to do with it, like the Spirarch. And she sees Cavendish, dressed impeccably in all of her Victorian steampunky stuff, and Sark. And even though Bridget can recognize that Sark is a warrior born, it's that oddity that he moves with the grace of a silk weaver, not the way that the rest of the warrior born seem feline. And Sark is talking. "I still don't see what all the fuss is about. A fire would do. One person in and out. You underestimate the Wayists. There are warrior born among their number too. Besides, a fire is not enough. A message must be sent." And we know what this is going to, but it's confusing as hell to Bridget.
We hate reading.
The king of Aurora was elected to lead, not to read. So
True.
Is elected?
You don't vote for kings.
All right. She says that we'll never destroy them while they remain in heaven. We must therefore draw them out. Bridget blinks at it. Oh, that is so weird. It does feel cryptic and maybe related to other things in Olympian Affair. So just try to remember that. Sark is warning her that the risks that she's taking might not go the way that she expects. But she hears from centuries from the Silk Weavers that the Grimm and company are coming in on the tunnels, no more than 20 each. And so she tells Sark to kill the prisoners. "I'd hate for the captain to think I wasn't true to my word." And so they have to do a gauntlet battle, it looks like. Bridget runs and gets the glass of jar crystals to Folly and then like falls to the floor and tries to aim at Sark and the gauntlet flashed. But it doesn't work because she's using etheric energy against an etherealist. Well, Cavendish is still there. And Folly is there and just doing her crazy crystal things. Folly and Cavendish start facing off against one another. And Cavendish says, "Oh, really? How many years have you been his apprentice and he's only taught you transference and kinetics? Tell me that's not the entire extent of your ability." And Folly's shocked, looking at Cavendish, and the blood drains from her face. "It isn't polite for peers to murder one another without introduction. And while you are not my equal, you do have talent." And introduces herself as Sycorax Cavendish. "Like you, I was once apprenticed to Master Etherealist Ephraim Ephrenus Ferris, and then he betrayed me." "And you are?" And Folly just says, "I am Folly," or "My name is Folly, ma'am." And Cavendish laughs and asks if Ferris gave her that name. And Folly says, "And much more than that." And she realizes that Cavendish is the person that was sending the message before that Folly had caught. "It's you. You are the gnat that I caught." And Cavendish doesn't get it. "Like, you were buzzing and buzzing, so I built a web to catch you. It wasn't a pretty web, but I did. And you are receiving orders. You have a new master now. Is that it?" And Folly says she doesn't want to talk to puppets. They can't talk back. Not really. They just dance on the strings. And Sark is ordered to go kill Bridget. And Cavendish is fighting with Folly. She just flicks a finger, and Folly is in total agony, falls to the ground, not really able to do anything. And then there's a gigantic explosion. In Chapter 53, the blasting charges blew a wide hole in the mound of the broken masonry that had been used to plug the tunnel. And Grimm is really hoping that he didn't just kill Bridget and Folly by choosing the wrong area to blast. And there's a bunch of chaos and fighting.
That doesn't sound right.
No, never. He sees that Bridget is down, lying sprawled on the floor as if she'd been struck by a stunning blow. And let's see, Cavendish and Sark are fighting things, and they're silk weavers. And he has the same realization of like, why are they here? And this is crazy, and they shouldn't be so contained. Benedict is trying to get to Bridget and help her, and Sark is trying to kill Bridget, and then he gets to fight Benedict. And Grimm has guns, although because of the nature of the whole iron rot thing, and they tend to not work very well.
And
it's
sometimes
also
explode.
Yeah, and also because it's so expensive to use, he doesn't really get to put in practice. And so he like has a gun and he's aiming at Cavendish. He's like, "I really wish I knew how to shoot better, and I really hope it doesn't explode on me." But it works out fine, and he shoots her in the abdomen. And the aeronauts of the Predator come in on a different tunnel, and they start fighting in different directions. Trying to get rid of the Silk Weavers, and it's kind of working, but there's still a lot of people getting injured and damaged, and the only person who can help them is Ferris if they've got the poisoning, and Ferris is incapacitated, so all of it comes back. And then Felix and the Verminocitors show up, and they know how to deal with Silk Weavers much better because they have the special tools and the training and the experience. The scale ashes that they have, they're whips of some form, right? But they have a bunch of like shards on them. Is that what the description is?
Yeah, like razor blades or something. So Small metal rings knitted into a tapered tube. Each ring is hung with a pointed edged metal scale.
Okay. Sounds quite painful.
Yep.
And after a bunch of fighting, Felix unwound his lash from a dead silk weaver and says, "You boys aren't bad for a bunch of rubbernecks, I mean." And Grim calls for Creedy, tells him to get himself and Stern to the Dr. Baggin, and then he turns to Felix and says, "What's a rubberneck?" "When we get this work done, I'll tell you." But then there's more crazy things happening, more explosions, more shrieks, and a second group of silk weavers as large as the first. There's all this fighting, and it's all really interesting, but it's kind of boring to try to read, so I'm just skipping through it and trying to get to the next part of dialogue.
You could just make up dialogue if you want.
I'm not very good at that, especially not on the fly. But you could. Go ahead.
So what happens is nothing. I got nothing.
Nothing.
I don't even remember where we are. I know there's like a big like crystal zappy thing coming, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's just yet.
So as they're trying to fend off the silk weavers, Bridget's still kind of unconscious because of the blast. It's only been like a minute. Actually hasn't been it long even for all of the pages that I'm going through.
I was gonna say she's speed running the Dresden version of like concussive knockouts. Like this is a lot for a first book. And she was already kind of brain damaged just by being her.
And Grimm is trying to get information from her of where is Folly because he hasn't seen her. And she says tunnel, lying on the floor. And then Grimm is afraid that he's then also blasted her into bits. But Folly is fine. She's just quiet. So she's not fine. I shouldn't say that. Other things are happening. Sark is fighting and taking down a lot of the aeronauts, and the aeronauts, they all have the gauntlets and are trying to fire the gauntlets, but it's becoming too heated up. They haven't had time to let them cool down, and so to the point they are going to run out of the ability to use the gauntlet soon.
If they just shot all of the spiders in the face like Gwen, this would just be done already. So
Cavendish sees Graham and says, "This is the third time you've interfered with my business, Captain. As you have spilled my blood, it shall be the last." He tries to bargain with her. "Call up your pets, guarantee the safe conduct of those with me, and I'll surrender. You can kill me however you like." She says, "I can do that without your cooperation. Thank you." And leaves. And that chapter ends with a horrifying cliffhanger until we then get to Folly in chapter 54. It always likes to put in these books where anything is happening, but it just says elsewhere because Folly is not at her body. She is elsewhere, whoever we don't know. She had noticed that Cavendish, Madam Puppet, had pointed a finger at her, and then she felt a geyser of etheric energy smash into her body, and then everything was just so painful. And she was aware of how painful everything was, and that triggered another thought, how odd it was that she should have the wherewithal to process such a thought when her nervous system was so utterly overwhelmed. She thinks she's dying, and that she's aware of the dying, and finds it very odd. For a moment, she floated in an empty void, and then she became conscious of solid ground beneath her, and it's earth heavily mixed with sand. And so she's standing on the surface, and she gets scared for a moment. And the sudden thrill for terror that went through her was entirely unnecessary, unfair, and impolite.
how rude.
Seriously. And she looks around, trying to learn and get her bearings. And there's footsteps, enormous footsteps that are coming closer. The mist stirred, and something vast and slow and seething with hate stopped just out of sight, so that all Folly could see was a great dark blur. And the great voice filled the air, resonant and mellifluous, like that of a particularly eloquent, poised, mature man, a professional speaker saying, "Report." But because she's confused, she says, "I beg your pardon, whatever do you mean?" And it just repeats, "Report." I hardly know what she meant the first time. I've not gained an epiphany in the insight in the past 5 seconds, I assure you. There's a flash of red light somewhere in the fog, and there's burning from 3 separate sources, and she thinks those might be eyes. And then it says, you are not Cavendish." "Indeed not, and I thank you for the compliment. Identify yourself." "Folly, who are you?" And it looks at her saying, "You are a potential asset." "I do not think so. I am not a puppet. You said so yourself." And she realizes that whatever this is the thing that's holding all of the puppet strings as she sees it on Cavendish. You're the one holding all of the puppet strings, and it says yield, and there's pressure on her that she's trying to fight. So, "Are you going to be at this long? If so, I'm afraid I must decline to continue. I have an event I should attend. Like, it seems fitting to be present for one's own death, at least." The voice says, "You are of one piece. I hardly think you can have said anything more obvious. Yet you sought to control me, just as Madame Puppet is being directed, just as the weavers are being directed." It asks, "How can you know this? If you cannot be made to serve, you will be unmade." And the ground that she seems to be standing on is starting to collapse. And she realizes that because she's in a place of thought, she can also build things in thought, and starts building stairs, even though as the ground is falling underneath her, she can climb up.
She starts playing Fortnite, in other words.
Yeah.
I wonder. No, this was written well before Fortnite, right? So it had to be, right?
Let's not read too much into my joke.
It is.
Yeah.
It is for real.
I mean, it's
It
like
is.
you
This
would
is
see
before
stuff
Fortnite.
like this in like the 90s X-Men and stuff, right? Where it's like you're in a psychic battleground in one or the other person's mind.
True.
And, you know,
That's
yeah.
yeah.
That's
and
the way
yeah.
I actually take it, you know. So,
Yeah, and there's that Justice League Unlimited episode where that happens too, and I get
Sure.
that. I wouldn't put it past Jim to put a Fortnite reference if he played Fortnite.
I'm pretty sure this
Yeah.
book predates Fortnite.
Fair enough. As I was after I said it.
Yeah.
It's funny to think about.
2015, 2016. It's one of those two.
July 2017 for Fortnite. So
Yeah, definitely.
$2015 for Aeronaut's Windlass. So highly
2
unlikely,
years.
but yeah, it, like I said, let's not read too much into my joke. It was funny. So
We don't need to overly examine and explain more jokes. We did that in the beginning. The Folly building her Fortnite stairs. She builds a door. She decides to go through the door, and the enemy below is screaming, "Devour her, destroy her," and then sits up abruptly, clutching her lumen crystals, blinking several times as she's in the tunnel, and everyone else is fighting, and all the Silk Weavers and people are very injured. And Folly's excited. She says to her crystals, like, "We did it. We escaped." And Bridget looks at her and is like, "Are you all right? What are you talking about?" All of the Silk Weavers every single eye of them is focused upon Folly and begin rushing forward even faster. Chapter 55. We switch back to Bridget's point of view, and Folly wakes up and says, "We did it. We escaped." And Bridget, what the hell's going on? Benedict declares that Folly is healthy enough. She's breathing, heartbeat is strong. She doesn't seem to be injured. Maybe she had a knock to the head. All things considered, I'm beginning to think that would explain a great deal if we'd all taken a knock to the head. And what are we going to do to get out? Benedict gives Bridget a heavy knife from his belt, and she sees that she takes it, that he's been bitten by the silk weavers, and even though he can withstand it for a lot longer than a normal person can, he is going to get sick from the silk weaver venom unless he can get to Ferris and be healed. He also gives her her gauntlet. I thought so long as we were walking right past it, I might as well fetch it for you. I thought you already had the gauntlet. They have a moment of trying to be truthful to each other, and she asks, like, "Are we going to die? Please tell me truthfully." And he doesn't really say so, but it's clear that he does assume that they're going to die.
Someday we may be eaten by creatures on the surface. Oh, wait. So. As Bridget's trying to figure out what she's doing, she notices that Folly is reacting to things that don't exist. Like her eyes went wide and around. She stared at the second tunnel's entrance and then lifted her hands. And Bridget remembers that she had had a precognitive reaction before, and she shouts at Grim to fire at the ceiling. And Grim doesn't think about it for too long. He just like stares at her half a second, said, "Okay," and then did it. She raised her gauntlet and started shooting at the ceiling of the tunnel and its entrance. And a horde of silk weavers are pouring forward right as she's doing that. And so Grim continues. And then, as all hope is lost, this thing that's happened a few times in the Dresden Files as well, the cats arrive. The cats arrive in their own war cries. It's an unsettling sound. When two cats suddenly wailed at each other in a similar fashion, it's downright unnerving. And when hundreds of them are caterwauling at the same time in a single voice, the sound alone was enough to make one feel as if the skin had been peeled from one's muscle and bone, to call up horrors inherited from ancestors long since dead and forgotten. Raoul and the Nine Claws had come to wage war, and they have their battle spurs on as much as they can, and they go after the silk weavers, and they don't have the issues with the gauntlets overheating because they don't have gauntlets. And Raoul is delighted, or Bridget is delighted to see Raoul, and he calls back to her and says, "Do not kill any of my prey. I have a wager with Non as to who can kill more." Grim just kind of takes it in stride and says, "Help the cats, bait the silk weavers." And then with a lot of mess and shrieking, it's over. Cats didn't quite kill the silk weaver, one of the last ones, so much as they spread it evenly over a dozen square yards of the tunnel. Bridget almost felt sorry for the beast. And Kettle nearby says, "Bugger me, little furry bastards don't play around, do they?" He's distrustful of cats as well. Grim chides him, "As all things considered, I think it's very wise not to deliver any unintentional insults." And Kettle agrees. That does seem like good sense. No offense intended, kitties. A very tearful reunion of Bridget and Raoul. She was so scared she thought she was going to die so long away from home. "And how could that happen when you have me to protect you?" he says back. And then he demands to go speak to Grim Shiptrees. Grim greets the cat gravely. "Master Raoul, you've preserved my life and the lives of my men. I am in your debt." And Raoul says, "I know that. I have a mission to complete as a member of the Spirax Warriors. There are still Auroran warriors loose in the territory of the Nine Claws. The Nine Claws and I have saved your lives. Now you must help them defend their territory." And this is great news to Grim because he wants to keep fighting after them as well. And then Merle shows up with more information because she's been tracking the Aurorans not getting into the fight. Grim is able to learn her name and it be introduced.
I said, while you spoiled children have been amusing yourselves killing prey that is not even good for food, I was doing the important work. And out with it. Where are they? They are at the temple. And what are they doing there? And Meryl says they are killing and burning. And Benedict gets very upset. He's like, we must help them. It's like, we're doing all we can. So they move out. In chapter 56, they go to the Temple of the Way, and we're Ryle's point of view. He's still wearing his bloodied battle spurs, and Ryle and Non have a moment. Non says that you slew as many as I did, and Ryle says he was not keeping track, even though a moment previously he was boasting to Bridget that he had killed 5 all by himself. And they're sharing respect. Non says that you spared the life of my Kit when you had more than sufficient reason to kill him. And he asks why, and Ryle says it was out of respect. His battle spurs are excellent. They're hardly used, and you should keep them. But Neen will earn his spurs again. Perhaps this time something will sink in. Bridget is asking Ryle, how did he get the 9 Claws to help? And he says, I saved their clan chief's Kit. And Bridget has saved it from what? From me.
From me. Yeah. Classic.
Yeah. I would knock down a spire for you, little mouse. He says quietly when no one else can hear. As they're going to the temple, Ryle's noticing that Benedict is not moving normally. He'd always seemed less clumsy to other humans, but that had all vanished. His legs were moving unevenly, and he was gasping for air just like the rest of them. He must have been weary. The weary of not, he had wits about him to lift his nose to the air and inhale, and they're following the smell of smoke of the temple. Creedy starts asking questions like, why burn a temple of the way? It doesn't make sense. And Bridget says, why burn a library? There must have been something of value in it, something that would prompt the Aurorans to make sure that it all burned by leaving men behind to ambush the Bucket Brigade. If they aren't letting anyone in, then they're not letting anyone out, and the Wayist priests are also being murdered. There's a lot of preparing to go into the temple that I kind of don't remember very much. There's probably also the moment as everything is built in wood because Habel Morning has a lot of wealth in a different kind of sense. So they split that level and having 2 different ones, everything built out of wood. So now one thing being on fire means the whole Habel might be set on fire. The actions of all the chimneys and the airways. The Bucket Brigade has been attacked by the Aurorans to stop it, but somehow things are still being kept orderly. And that's suspicious. How did people just kind of react so well to this disaster? I mean, it's a good thing that they're not freaking out and things are still being watered down, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of implication in here, and it's just like the implication is that the Spire Arc got the guilds basically some kind of advanced warning so that they were ready for it. So the the underground criminal element was ready, but it's like if you knew all of that, like you didn't dispatch guards, like more Spire Arc guards, or get a detachment of Marines deployed, or set the guildies like in an ambush, or like just stop the burning of the library in the first place, so I don't know.
The Spire Arc might not have known that the temple was going to be set on fire, but he just known that something bad is going to happen and be prepared for a disaster. Sure. It could be that he knew that it was going to be targeted because he knows of this book, I think.
Maybe he knew they were going to burn the Habel and he just didn't know where it was going to be or something along those lines. Because it's like, it's wood. They're trying to cripple us economically. Let's prepare for that, but yeah. So.
Again, the question of Why burn a library? And Kettle suggests it's a diversion to take them away from their real target. And it's going to get plenty of attention. But what if it's not a diversion? What if they only sent 30 men for the bloody Lancaster battery? They brought their whole force here at the temple. So why?
Right.
But like, what can be so important about books? Well, books are knowledge, and knowledge is power. And so more power than a crystal battery, perhaps. And there are people still inside the temple that's burning, and Benedict wants to run in, and Grim warns him. It's like the smoke could kill you as well as the fire itself. And Benedict does it anyway. He runs in. And Bridget drops Raoul like a sack of stale tubers and wins running after him. And as she did, a full quarter of the roof at the rear of the temple gave way with the rumble of falling stone and thundercloud, and so Raoul can't follow immediately. His heart goes berserk. The building was on fire. What was Little Mouse thinking? Such things were deadly. Had she no consideration at all? Who was going to give Raoul his favorite ear rubs if Little Mouse were burned to char and ash? The very thought made him want to crouch against the ground and curl into a little ball. It was truly shocking discourtesy. He should let her be burned up if she was going to treat him in so cavalier a fashion. Except that makes him even more distressed. And without any further hesitation, the cat growled and rushed into the burning building. And I think I'll call it there, just because we've got 4 minutes to make it to an hour. Chapter 57 we can start at next time.
Yeah, I do like Raoul's primal fear and frustration, basically come out. It's just like fire is like the last thing that you should be running towards. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? I would rather you ran towards, a mist maw, but then he goes anyway, because that's what love is.
Yeah.
So,
but I really appreciate the translation of his distress into terms that he can really grapple with, of like, how dare she? I have to protect her. She's so stupid. How dare she? And his affrontedness. And that's how he responds to everything, of like, how dare you?
Right.
Yeah. And I agree with this. It is just Jim's natural habit of beating the shit out of his characters.
Pretty much.
All right. You gonna do the professional thing, Andreas? You showed up just for this?
I was kind of showing up for the meeting. I'm eating, but hello, hey everybody. Outro, right? Outro. Fuck, what's my outro? Nope. No, I have it written down here. Give me a second. I'm holding my pants down here.
If only they had clocks in your country, and you could tell that the hour wasn't up, so maybe we were still broadcasting.
I didn't think you'd just throw me in here.
Why not? Why wouldn't I? This is your job.
True. Thanks for tuning in to While We Weren't Recording. If you enjoyed our banter, consider joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/brokenjars. By becoming a patron, you'll unlock exclusive access to our Discord server, where we wage epic gift wars and chat about anything and everything. Also, remember that we stream these episodes live on YouTube Saturday at 5 p.m. GMT, and visit our channel at youtube.com/at the Dresden Files Podcast Show. Throw us a subscription, leave a comment, and give us a like. It means the world to us. And don't forget to check out our website at brokenjars.xyz.
All right. Not too bad. Rough start, but you carried it through.
I think it was great, Andres. Thank you. I support you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess we'll call it.